Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 6 of the Canine Culture Podcast. Today is just going to be me, Brittany. I'm going to be the only one speaking to you. I don't have a speaker today. And the topic is Titan, the city dog. So if you know me or follow me on social media, you probably know that I have an 11-year-old Pomeranian named Titan. He will be 12 at the end of March. And we got Titan when he was a baby. We got him when we lived in Ohio. And to be quite honest with you, he was the absolute worst puppy I have ever had. He obviously barked a lot, which if you guys know him, you know he barks a lot now too. He tore up anything and everything that he could find. And he was just not a great puppy, but he was so cute. So a little backstory on how we got him. And I may have told you guys this before, but I accidentally went into a pet shop. You won't catch me doing that now, but as an 18-year-old, went into a pet shop and thought I was going to buy a bunny. I, again, have no idea why. And I saw the cutest little Pomeranian sitting in a kennel. And I told Nick at the time that we absolutely had to get that dog. So after 6 hours of decision making and getting a loan from the bank, our very first loan together, we got Titan. So we had Titan while we lived in Ohio, in Columbus, Ohio. And we lived in an apartment, so, we tried to train him not to bark as much. Potty training wasn't too difficult. It was pretty easy. He didn't really like the pee pads, so he would go outside in the grass. We had plenty of grass outside. And then we moved to Jacksonville, Florida in 2011. And that transition was also very, very easy for Titan. He was very adaptable. Moving to Florida really didn't change much for him as far as habits and lifestyle and all of that. The only, new thing in Florida was lizards. And so he just loved to chase the lizards. So the real focus of this podcast, like I said, is on Titan, the city dog. And we moved to New York City in 2017. So when we first moved to New York, we did not have a place to live. So I actually moved there before Nick and Titan did. And I just bopped around from Airbnb to Airbnb. I slept in closets, random houses, you name it. And I stayed there, whether it was 1 day, 3 days, 5 days. And I would just bring my suitcase everywhere or leave it at work. I was working 2 full-time jobs. And then I convinced the owner of a gym in Chelsea to give me a free membership. And that's where I would take my showers, keep some of my stuff in those lockers as well. So I was living in New York City. Titan and Nick came to join me. And Titan's very first experience living in New York City was in Brooklyn. We were staying at an Airbnb in Bed-Stuy. And where we were at in Bed-Stuy honestly wasn't the safest area. We'll identify that as up and coming, but where we were in particular was probably not the safest. So what we would do is, wake up super early, catch the train, take Titan with us, take him to work with us. And then we were working extremely long hours and we would come home and it would be dark. And basically we would run from the train stop to the Airbnb. So Titan the city dog really starts in Brooklyn. And from the get-go, we noticed there's no grass. We had nowhere to take him out at. So we would always try to take him on the sidewalk or on the street. And he didn't go to the bathroom for about a week. So for anyone that's going to be transitioning their dog to a city, or if you're going to be getting a dog and you already live in the city, that is something to be mindful of, is depending on the neighborhood that you're in, grass could be few and far between. And so, unfortunately, a week into living in New York City, we had to take him to a vet in Hell's Kitchen. I won't tell you who the vet was, but very old school. Everything was handwritten with paper. At the end of the day, he was able to get the job done. Titan got some medicine. And slowly but surely, we were able to train him to urinate on the sidewalk and to go number 2 on the streets. So that was the first big adjustment of him becoming a city dog, was learning to go to the bathroom on concrete, no matter what the conditions were, no matter what time it was. And so kind of leads to the second point of, if you have a dog in a big city, you have to be mindful of, you're going to have to get up every day, go down your stairs of your apartment. In New York City, we had to walk up our Airbnb, and then our next apartment, all walk ups. So you've got to make sure that you have time to take them out. And if you're like most people in New York, you're hustling and you're working some very long hours. And so you need to make sure that you have the time for a dog. So we got very lucky in the fact that we could take him to work. And I will say, for New York City specifically, it's this very, very dog-friendly city. We would take Titan to grocery stores, to restaurants, obviously to work every day. I even took him to the gym with me. So New York City is very dog-friendly. So with that, you got to think of a few other things. So number one, when you're using public transportation, like you're on the subway, on the MTA, your dog has to be in a bag. And so we actually went through a few cheap bags that we got, just getting the cheapest bags we could find online, to finding some quality bags that would hold up to our daily commute. Because you know how the MTA is. They're not always running on time. And so your 10-minute commute might be an hour commute. So if you're living in the city, number one, make sure you get a bag for your dog for just daily transportation. Number two are those poop bags. You're going to be picking it up. And if you don't pick it up, you're going to get either some dirty looks or you could get in trouble for it. Number three, leash laws. So New York City does have a pretty strict leash law, and I think you'll see different areas where it's not enforced as much. And so like Central Park, there's areas of Central Park where people just kind of meet up and they let their dogs hang out, and they're not necessarily all on leashes. But it's something to think about. Just make sure your dog's always on a leash. Also, the next thing to think about is the weather conditions. So we had to get Titan snow boots because throughout the winter, the salt that they put down on the streets and the sidewalks and the stairs can be very, very damaging to a dog's feet. And I know it might look silly to put your dog in some boots, but we just got little like rubber silicone booties, and those did the job. We got like a 4-pack on Chewy. We were able to use those, and they worked perfectly for the snow, even for rainy days. And so along with that, thinking about a snow coat, a raincoat, it all sounds crazy, but if you have a super fluffy dog and you're taking them out on your lunch break, on a 10-minute lunch break, you're not going to have time to come in and dry them. So just making sure your dog has the correct clothing and gear for their paws to make sure you're taking care of them. And also just walking on the sidewalks every single day. We actually had to get like a organic coconut balm to put on Titan's feet. And so I would probably recommend that for anyone who is transitioning into more of a city life. Maybe you're moving from the suburbs or from the country. But if you're moving into a big city like New York City, San Francisco, LA, Miami, Chicago, any of those places, getting something to put on your dog's feet at night to try to moisturize those and make sure they don't get cracked, that's also really important. So to kind of go back to the apartment. So like I said, we were doing an Airbnb, and most of you listening to this will probably recognize that New York City has now cracked down a lot on Airbnbs, and you're not going to see them as often. And there's so many rules and restrictions for those. But nevertheless, let's say you find one or you find a hotel and maybe you're just visiting. There's a lot of different restrictions as far as size and weight and what you can and can't do. And then transitioning into an apartment, getting an apartment in New York City is a whole life event in and of itself. It's extremely difficult. They take a look at everything from your finances to your tax returns to honestly, whatever you can think of, they analyze it for you to get an apartment. So we kind of recognized getting an apartment. There are, of course, weight restrictions. And at the time, Titan fluctuated between 12 and 14 pounds. There were apartments that didn't let you have a dog over 10 pounds. And so that 2 extra pounds saying you have 12 pounds was limiting for us as far as what apartments we can get. So just something to be mindful of, again, whether you're visiting or whether you're moving there. But like I said, I feel like a lot of the big cities are dog friendly, and I can speak about New York City specifically, super dog friendly. And so for people who can't take their dog to work, there are quite a few options as far as dog walkers. There's so many different apps, so many different companies. And so you do have that ability to hire a dog walker if you can't take your dog to work, because I know it's not practical for everyone. So that is something to think about, something to also factor in as far as affordability. Can you afford to send your dog to doggy daycare? Can you afford a pet walker every single day? So just some things to think about as far as affordability. Along with affordability, vet bills. We found that the vet care in New York City was quite pricey. And so we actually kept our vets in the state of Ohio. And that's where we would go whenever Titan needed something. And there were scenarios where we did have to go to that vet that I mentioned in Hell's Kitchen. Also a hospital that we had to go to on the Upper East Side when he had a back injury. But we ended up ultimately just keeping our Ohio vet because the vet care was so expensive. So that's another consideration if you're thinking of moving there, if you're thinking of adopting and already live in a big city. You may want to take a look at the vet care to make sure that it's practical and that it's something that you're going to be able to do. Similarly, with affordability, thinking about groomers. A groomer in any big city, it's pretty expensive. I mean, it seems expensive all the way around. I'm fortunate enough to know how to groom Pomeranians and Cocker Spaniels and a few other breeds. So I was able to do it. But that's another consideration if you're getting a dog. So that might influence the breed that you get, the size of dog that you get. It might influence the area that you live in. Maybe you move out to a borough, or maybe you move to like New Jersey or somewhere like that. So just some different things to think about. And I know we've kind of talked about a little bit about everything, and it's been focused on New York City. But ultimately, I think the hardest transition for us was the bathroom. Aside from that, though, everything else, Titan was highly adaptable, and he really did become a city dog. He was an Upper East Side dog. He was a little bit snobby. And one great thing about New York is there's so many dog parks. So most neighborhoods have at least one dog park. And you do need to be careful. I know not everyone is a fan of dog parks, and you definitely need to be careful with smaller dogs. Keep the small dogs in the small dog park, large dogs in the large dog park. Luckily, on the Upper East Side, there is that split, and you have that opportunity. You also have that opportunity in a few other areas of the city, which is really nice. So your dog maintains that socialization and they get to play with other dogs. That is also another, I suppose you could say, pro, even though, like I said, you do need to be careful. And along those lines, of course, keeping up with your vaccines, making sure you're staying up to date on heartworm preventatives, flea preventatives, the Bordetella for kennel cough. That's a big thing to make sure you're keeping up on, especially if your dog's going to be in a kennel or at doggy daycare or whatever the case may be. That's pretty much everything for Titan the city dog. I just wanted to give you guys a short little episode on, if you're thinking about moving to the city, a big city, and getting a dog, or maybe you already have a dog, or maybe you already live in a big city and you have a dog, you're having some issues, and you're wondering if anyone else has gone through the same thing, and I can promise you that they have. And so with that, I would say just be very mindful of your situation and the dog that you're going to be purchasing or adopting. And similarly, if you are looking to make a major life change and move to a different city, also make sure you're taking into consideration the well-being of your dog and their quality of life. And just, trying to be mindful of that as you make changes in your life. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about what it looked like to live in New York City with a small dog, if you have questions about riding the subway and keeping your dog in the bag, honestly, anything. So it's Canine Culture Podcast at gmail.com. And you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you guys so much for listening to this short episode, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thank you for tuning in to the Canine Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at canineculturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.